Well, let's see here if I can, this is going away on me here. See if it hangs around. Turn with me, if you would, to John chapter 8. John chapter 8. I'm going to read to you verses 1 through 11. Now Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again unto the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and he taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. What sayest thou? But this, they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, and with his finger he wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. And when they continued asking him, he lifted himself up, and he said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast the first stone at her. And again he stooped down, and he wrote on the ground. And then they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. And when Jesus had lifted himself up, and he saw none but the woman, he said unto the woman, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said unto him, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. And then I also want to read to you Psalm 124. And it is a short psalm, but let me read it to you. This David. But he says, If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now Israel may say. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, he repeats himself. He said, When men rose up against us, they had swallowed us up quick, when their wrath was kindled against us. Then the waters had overwhelmed us, and the stream had gone over our soul. Then the proud waters had gone over our soul. Blessed be the Lord who hath not given us as a prey to their teeth. Our soul has escaped. As a bird out of the snare of the fowlers, the snare is broken, and we are escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. You know, there's something so wonderful about watching Jesus. I can't imagine, in a sense of actually being there for the 3.5 years of his ministry. But he's just, when you watch him just through the scriptures as we're able to, he's like watching this master craftsman or this master musician. That's somebody that comes down, and picks up an instrument, whether it's a violin or they come down and they just sit at a piano for a moment. And as they begin to play it, you realize this man owns the piano. That man owns the violin. It's an extension of himself. With stuff that is in him, he just has the capacity to bring it out into play. And it's so beautiful and it's so masterful. And I think watching Jesus is one situation after another, wherever he was. Whatever the predicament, whatever the situation that sometimes seems so hopeless or seemed like, boy, what are you going to do with this one? And it's like Jesus was given another instrument every day to play. And yet every one of them, he walks away and people just marveled. Is his answers or the power or the transformed life, or you come into a situation and there's a demoniac or there's something there going happening that everybody is just, afraid and what do we do and get him out of here or whatever. And then Jesus would just handle it. And people would walk away and watch something about him. And it had to be wonderful to watch it time and time again. And here we have in John chapter 8, Jesus taking this woman caught in the act of adultery. In the very act, we're told, the Pharisees tell Jesus. And something there that it looks like a very, very difficult circumstance. We'll get into more of the difficulty in a moment. But watching Jesus, though, set this woman free. Watching Jesus take this woman who had been bound in her sin and bound in her guilt for who knows how many years, but now watching him set her free. If the Son has set you free, you're free indeed, he goes on to say after this. And watching him do this. And interestingly enough, I love to parallel this with Psalm 124, because Psalm 124, David makes a comment there, and he says, Blessed be the Lord who has given us not as a prey to their teeth. And he says, but as our soul escaped, as a bird out of the snare of the fowler, the snare is broken and we are escaped. And here, you see here this picture that David has almost of a fowler. Now, a fowler, we don't use that word as much, but poaching. is the same thing, a poacher or a fowler. Or actually in the Bible, an usurper or a poacher. It's these words, essentially, they're hunting terms. And here the enemy is referred to as a poacher, as a fowler. But he says, as a bird that escaped out of the snare of the fowler, as our soul has escaped. And here, David, they're looking at God and realizing God takes somebody there that's been ensnared, somebody there that is caught, somebody there that a poacher pulled them in and caught them. Now, it's interesting, a poacher or a fowler, there's essentially 4 qualities about them that make them why you would call them a fowler, as opposed to just a regular hunter. If somebody, you can go out and hunt, for birds or whatever, but a fowler is somebody, or a poacher is somebody who comes onto land that he doesn't own, and he lays traps or decoys or food or bait or whatever. Usually he wears camouflage and he hides over, in the bulrushes or something near. Secondly, he hunts a prey that is not in season. A third thing about a poacher is he uses complete and total deception. And then he appeals, fourthly, to the weaknesses of his prey and the desires of his prey. So it's like here we have, a flock of birds that are flying along. As they're flying along, they're going south or whatever at the winter, and they've been flying and flying, and they're getting exhausted. They're tired. They've covered a lot of miles or something. And the poacher there, he knows where they start from. He knows, where they're going. He knows that they get tired. He knows the places there along the geography where they start getting weary. They start getting tired for the night, and where they're going to start looking for a safe place. And also some source of food, to get some food, get some rest before they continue traveling, on down south for more and more. And but here, a poacher, a fowler is somebody there that he goes there, knowing the fowl, knowing the bird is coming along, knowing what season it is, knowing where they're going to get tired, and then he goes and he sets his trap. And he can do it with traps, or he can, if they're shooting them or however else they may be going about trying to get them. But they'll oftentimes, a good poacher, fowler, he'll go and there's a pond out there and they know that they need water. They know they want to, land where there's water, sit in the water, the ducks. And so they'll get decoys that look as much like a duck as they can possibly get. That they go out and they put in the water like, oh, look at this. There's a whole duck family, that are having a nice little rest there. And then he goes and he gets on the camouflage outfit and he gets himself the duck call that he sits over there. So when they come, they're over, and or whatever, they got making the noise to get the attention. And then the ducks flying over, they look, oh, great. Must be safe. There's already ducks there ahead of us. There's the source. There's the rest. And all their senses, he knows just their instincts. He knows their fears. He tries to alleviate their fears and their protection. He knows their desires. He knows they're tired. He knows they're hungry. And or if it's a poacher, maybe hunting for an animal, they do the same thing. They go out and they set a trap. They set a snare. And what they'll do is they'll take, some cable or rope or whatever else it is, put it around a tree at one end. Then they go and they have this snare, and or these bear traps, that bear steps on it and boom, it goes, shuts on their foot and holds them there. And then, but then they'll go take that trap. They lay the trap down, and then they'll put a bunch of leaves or something kind of over it and put some fresh meat, knowing there that an animal is going to be coming, the animal is going to be hungry, the animal is looking, and the animal goes, whoa, there's fresh meat. I mean, just sitting out there. And, and knowing that then as soon as it sets in that trap, boom, it kicks the trap, and the snare, either tightens around their foot or snaps shut, and they've got them. Well, the Bible looks at, when you hear the Lord, he equates Satan as being there, this fowler, as being a poacher, and somebody there that's how he ensnares people the same way. And but the interesting thing about the devil, the way that he is, as opposed to your average poacher, I guess, is that he doesn't just simply get them to kill and eat, sort of things like a lot of other poachers normally would do. Actually, that's the way that Satan just begins his work. It's not the end of his work, like I got you and now I'm going to kill you. It actually, then he even begins a greater work than ensnaring, than catching. For again, he's called an usurper, he's called a fowler, the master deceiver, he's called the accuser of the brethren. And that is that the devil, what he does is he gets somebody there to get drawn into some sin, some attraction, some appetite of that they naturally maybe have of their flesh, but gives an unhealthy way to go about doing it, pulls them in, ensnares them into something. And then as soon as he gets his snare around them, as soon as he gets them in his trap, now he gets to do his greater work that sometimes is even greater to him than actually catching his prey. And that is, he becomes, as the Bible calls, the accuser of the brethren. He can become somebody there, once in his trap, once there. Now he knows there that person that's caught in the trap, the snare is around them. They've got to get out of there. Oh, no, I was told about that. I knew I shouldn't have done this, or whatever. But they're trying to get out. And as they're trying to get out and of something that they got caught in, some sin, something there that they were just sucked into it, a moment's weakness or whatever. They knew better. They were told better. They were taught better. But then all of a sudden, there was something there to satisfy that desire, satisfy an appetite there, that there's a sense of guilt. There's a sense I shouldn't do it, but they did it anyway. Now he ensnares them. Now he gets to do even a greater work, because now he watches them struggle to try to get out. I've got to get out of here. I've got to get free of the snare. And they try to, whatever they've got to do. And they're truly sorry. They're truly grieved. They realize, I knew it. The guilt that he now has. They try harder. We come to God, I'm sorry. I knew I shouldn't have done that. Why did I do that? I'm going to try harder. I'm going to stay closer. God, forgive me. I'll never do that again. And we set a higher standard for ourselves. We make new resolutions. We'll never do that again. I'm never going to be around there again. But it doesn't work. No matter what, what we do is we're trying to pull out and get away. It's kind of the farther and harder we try to get away from the snare, the tighter it gets around us. The tighter there, that grasp, as you pull away, the bloodier it gets. The greater its grip almost. Because 1 Corinthians 15:56 says, the sting of death is sin, but the strength of sin is the law. In other words, we come along, and when we fail and when we sin, sometimes God, I'm not going to do it ever again. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. It'll never happen again. And we'll set a higher standard at it, and we make a law for ourselves. We set a standard almost for ourselves. And that it'll never happen again. But all that happens, the Bible says, is we strengthen sin. The strength of sin is the law. The strength of it is what even makes it worse is my own attempt to get out of it, is my own, conviction or something there. And we make this whole new self-inflicted law. We set this standard, in a sense, for ourselves, which only gives the enemy a greater opportunity to accuse us further. And then he keeps us in guilt. He threatens us. Then at that point, now that he has us and we're in the snare and he caught us in the act, so to speak, now it gives him the opportunity to do the worst. And that is, he looks at us and he threatens us with exposure. I'll tell everybody on you. I'm going to tell God on you. I'm going to tell the world on you. And I'm going to tell them what you did. And now, all of a sudden, the fear of it. I was talking, a while back with a pastor who fell, sadly, terribly in sin. But it happened a number of times. And he's sitting there talking to me, and he's weeping. And he's telling me, he says, every time this happened, I would cry. I would weep. I would actually to God, how did I, I could look at his face when he's telling me this. He said, I just felt terrible. I knew how wrong I preach against it. And all of this. And he says, and I would, God, I will never do that again. Every time this is it, never again. And then it would happen again and again. You see, the interesting thing, the power of sin doesn't lie simply in the act only. There is a greater power, and that is the power to contain us, the power to hold us in guilt, because something, once it's happened, now they're exposed, it's forever there. With a lot of you, I could say the name John Hinckley. If I said that name and you're old enough, you would realize that's the man who shot Ronald Reagan. That's the man there who did one thing that he did in one day, there in his life. There now he's forever exposed. Charles Manson, say that anyway, one thing. You look at it, and there's Sirhan. And that, of course, this is going, he was the man who shot Bobby Kennedy. But I mean, people, sometimes they do something one time, and they're now ensnared for their life. They're now in the guilt of it for their life. And you can go years and years and years and years, but that one day, that one sin, that one failure, because it got exposed, there it is. What do you do with it now? And here in John 8, we see this woman. There's some Pharisees. They had been trying for a long time. Everybody, how do we bring Jesus down? This man, he's a fake. He's a fraud. He's not real. That's what they were convinced of. He's not the real deal. And they were trying to come up with some ingenious way to get Jesus. And they come up with a perfect plot. Perfect one to their thinking. And because on one hand, Jesus had preached a lot. He'd preached about the law. And he had said, there and taught on how the law, he says that he himself, he fulfilled all that is written in the book of the law, every bit of it. That he honored the law of Moses. He completely believed in that. And yet at the same time, while he is doing this, he is out forgiving people. He's out being merciful. He's out being graceful. And people that had broke the law and had come to him, he's now forgiving them. And they're looking there and they says, now, we can't make those work. And so then they get this ingenious thing. They get this woman who they caught in the act of adultery, an adulteress now, therefore, and they decide, let's bring her to Jesus. And with the witnesses against her, let's bring these witnesses and come and say, we caught this woman in the act of adultery in the very act. And they said, now Moses says in the law that we're to stone such a woman. What sayest thou? And they figure we have him. We've got him. We don't care what he answers. Either he'll answer, well, you got to stone her, and show that he's, as legalistic as they are. And he honored Moses. Moses said, now what do you say? We caught her in the act of adultery. What do we do? And then he would have to become legalistic like that. Or he would have to just say, I really don't believe that legal stuff. I just feel sorry for her, and I just forgive her, showing he didn't honor. So I don't think they cared what his answer was. Either way, they had him in the perfect catch-22. No matter what you say, your answer will reveal, that you're not real, that you're a fraud. And it's interesting. It says here, we caught this woman in the act of adultery in the very act. Now, in the law, by both, both parties were to be stoned, not just simply one of them. And so if they caught her in the very act, the way adultery happened back then was it take a man and a woman. What it takes these days, I don't know. But at any rate, it took two. and here, so it doesn't say anything about the man. They grabbed this woman. They catch her in the very act. Whether they was set up for the whole thing and whatever it was, but only because obviously to catch her in the very act, they had to know who was with her and set it up, and maybe one of their buddies, hey, go in there and get this prostitute and bring her in, catch her, and we'll walk in and catch you in the very act, and so here they set her up, obviously, but at any rate, so then they grab her, and then they turn, to him, and I could just imagine as they grab her, they basically said, we're taking you to God. We're telling God on you. We're telling the world on you. You did this and you thought nobody knew about it. Well, by the time this day's over, everybody's going to know who you are and what you are. And I would imagine that from the moment they got her, there had to be 2 heel marks all the way from her, little hut, wherever she was, all the way down to where Jesus was, just dug in the ground. No, don't do that to me. Don't take me there. Probably the fear and the heartache and that sin and everything was just overwhelming to her. And here she's dragged to Jesus. You just look and say, what's Jesus going to do? How is he going to handle this? Probably wonder, what does God think about this? Jesus, he must hate her. He's got to hate her. He's got to realize he must be so angry. At the very least, so unbelievably disappointed. He must got to look at this woman and despise her. And look at her, see her, you what? And after all, he made the law. He fulfilled the law. He loved the law, and she had broken the law. And the amazing thing is she gets drugged before him. Instead of it bringing out his anger and his disappointment and his hostility, it brought out his love. It brought for him, it was almost this incredible opportunity to express love and a mercy and a grace. And you see, the reason for this is that Jesus sees it all. He sees everything. He sees the whole thing. Are there any of you that are fishermen here? Any fishermen? You're poachers, you're fowlers, you're terrible, wicked, sinful, evil people. No, I'm just kidding you. Maybe, maybe not. No, just kidding. But the point of it is, if you're a good fisherman, you go down to the sporting goods store and you go in and you buy yourself just the right pole for what it is. What test of line do I need for what it is that I'm going to be going after? Do I need weights? Do I need, floater and stuff or whatever? What's the bait? What are all the lures that you're going to need there to attract, the fish that you want? And then maybe you go down there when you go fishing, you go down there to the boat shop or whatever, the bait shop, and hey, what bait are they going for? What are they hitting these days? And you say, what's the best thing you got here? I'm going fishing. And then they come and I say, well, we got this, and we got, salmon eggs, and we got over here, and we got worms and whatever else on this thing. Well, what's the best? Well, actually, we have a little lure here that's incredible. Unbelievable. If you want to buy this lure, they're going for this lure. We call her the Painted Lady. And she's incredible, this little lure. It's a little fish, and she is decked out like you've never seen. She's got, she's glossy. She's got glitter all over that the sun comes down and reflects off of. She's got big red lips, sitting out there or whatever. If you've heard these lures, and boy, when the sun hits that and that thing's going through the water, you're going to go along there and, whoa, that's going to catch every fish's eye in the sea. Go along, and they're not going to see, the hook in it. They're just going to see that lure going through, and their mama warned them, don't ever go for painted ladies. If you see a fish out there that's slick and got speckles all over and big lips, she's not real. She'll take you down. I'm sure the mama fish told all the little babies about this, and they were warned, but they never saw anything like this. I don't care what my mama said. Mama said there'd be days like this, but mama was wrong, or whatever. They're going to be pulled right into it. You see, Jesus sees all of it. He sees every bit of it. He just doesn't see the moment that we go out and there's the painted lady. Or there's somebody comes along and, hey, you're down, you're depressed, you're having a tough time. And, hey, here, smoke this. Hey, here, this, first joint's free. Or here's this great pill. No, that's not right. I shouldn't do that. Here, snort this, try this, all of it. But here, he sees every bit of it. He sees, the enemy getting you weak and tired and vulnerable. He sees there that when you don't know where else to go, and he sees there, sets the whole thing up. He's a poacher. He's a fowler. He's been doing this for thousands of years. He knows exactly, he studies people. He knows where they're weak, what they desire, where their heart, and it can be easily drawn. And here, when Jesus sees all of this, rather than getting angry, rather than there when he looks at this woman, because he saw the guys plotting, he knew the Pharisees were after, he knew her weakness, they knew her weakness, they knew what her price would be, they knew how to set it up, they knew the whole thing, and so they set the whole thing up, do all of this, and then all of a sudden she pulled in, sink the hook in, and now drag her down. But Jesus sees every bit of it. He sees all the plotting, all the planning, all the setting up. And instead of it bringing out his anger and his wrath and his disappointment, it brings out his love, brings out his mercy. He looks at this woman caught in the act, and something in there he's determined, I've got to get the hook. I've got to get the hook out of her jaw. I've got to get out, there. He loves, he cares. He saw there's somebody that he died for, that he's giving his life for, that he ever lived for, that he created in his image, who he wants back to himself. Somebody there who through their life they've been pulled in and ensnared, and now the guilt. Now they know I did it. They know that I don't want to do it. I feel terrible about it. I know I'm wrong. And I'm not going to do it anymore. They set a higher standard. They try harder. But the harder they try, the deeper the snare goes. And the more they want to pull themselves away, the bloodier it gets. They're caught. And here Jesus, there he's determined to expose them and to deal with it. And here as you watch him and as you see him work, his problem wasn't just forgiving the woman. That was easy. That was easy, forgiving her, loving her, caring, for the fish. Say, I'm going to set you free. But the greater work wasn't just loving the fish or loving the duck or loving the animal that got caught in there. His greater work was there getting the snare out. His greater, and he looks there, where are thine accusers? He's got to deal with the accusation. He's got to, how do I deal with this accusation that's in their life? John Wesley was one of history's great evangelists, and his brother, Charles, was one of the great hymn writers of all of history. All of history. So many of our hymns were written by Charles Wesley that are still alive. One of them is, for 1,000 tongues to sing. Maybe some of you know it or have heard of it. But one verse, for 1,000 tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise, the glories of my God and King, the glories of his grace. The third verse in that hymn, it says, he breaks the power of canceled sin. He sets the prisoner free. His blood can make the foulest clean. His blood availed for me. And what an insightful verse Charles Wesley writes in there. He says about Jesus, he breaks the power of canceled sin. He realizes just canceling sin is one thing. You can come in here today and sit down and know you're forgiven. You know Christ died for you. You know that you're forgiven. You know that he's going to come for you. You know your name is written in the Lamb's Book. You know you're forgiven, and yet the guilt can still have power over you. You're still living under the sense of that guilt. But Jesus, he breaks the power of canceled sin. He sets the prisoner free. And when you watch it, how he does it, he has to deal with her accusers. And so you watch this. They bring him there and says, now Moses said that we should kill this woman. What do you say? And he just sits there and he goes down and he starts writing in the sand. And, it's almost like he looks at her. He says, well, of course you can't fly yet. You're ensnared. You've got guilt. And you go on as long as that guilt is there. You'll repeat it. I've got to get you free. I've got to get the snare dealt with. And so here, as you watch Jesus, he writes in the sand. Now, it's not recorded what he wrote. All we know that they keep asking him, and he stood up and he looked and he goes down and he writes more. And one of the things that's one of the most common assumptions there, what could he write in the sand that then, and it says there, then when they saw what he wrote in the sands, that they one by one peeled off from the eldest to the youngest of his accusers. And what was it that he could have written in that sand that one by one they'd excuse themselves? Say, I got to go. And, some people think, well, maybe he wrote down the word adultery. Maybe he wrote down coveting, lying, gossip, stealing, or whatever. And then maybe he wrote down Joseph, Levi, Jaime, Matthew, Abraham, or whatever else, their names. And then they keep on saying stuff to him, and then he looks up and maybe he writes a line from one to the other. One to the other. But it says about Jesus, he gave himself to no man, for he knew the hearts of all of them. He could look at every one of them, and he knew what ensnared them. And there as he drew the line, something convicted them. For it says there, about them, and they which heard it being convicted in their own conscience. Something, he said, pierced and convicted them of their own sin. What they were ensnared in. And one by one, if you can imagine this, one of them says, so I forgot. I promised my wife I'd bring home a loaf of bread. I better go do that. And the oldest, and from the eldest to the least. Why the oldest to the least? Well, the older you are, the more sin you've done. It's pretty simple. I got a little granddaughter that's like 19, 20 months old. She's not much of a sinner. She's a sinner, that's for sure. We watched that with her. You could sit there and tell her something, and the moment she realized what you're telling her and what you want, and she didn't want it, she will drop whatever it is, and she runs right out of the room in defiance. You look there, and so she's learning to sin pretty good, but she'll hone the skill with time. She'll get better and better at it, and before it's solved. And hopefully the Lord will solve it all, but only at the same time. When you look at this and you realize always from the eldest down to the least, one by one they leave. But as the guilt is terrible. One of the things that but he breaks the power of canceled sin. He sets the prisoner free. My grandparents on my mother's side, they were very loving and wonderful grandparents in many ways, but my grandmother particularly, she was never a very happy woman. Don't know how to say it other than that. My grandfather was successful and did fine and provided, for her very well. But no matter what, she was just never seemingly a happy woman. And she was a good grandmother in many ways, but interestingly enough, as time goes on, my mother came to Christ when I was, no grade school, and then my mother just took off in the Lord, and she led her sister to the Lord. And then as time went on, my grandmother, she was one there that she was a good Methodist. They went to church all the time, and they were very involved, and they gave, and he was very supportive of all sorts of good causes and donated heavily to the YMCA and things. But at any rate, as time goes on, my grandfather dies. My grandmother is there in rest home, and my aunt and my mother would take different days and go read and pray with her, share. And she, through all this time, she came to the Lord wonderfully. But as they kept on, she got older and weaker. One day they came to the rest home, and there was an envelope. And in this envelope, it said, to my mother and my aunt, their names on it, please do not open and read till after my death. Well, they talked about it and decided, no, we need to read this now. They open it up and read the letter. And in this letter, she goes and here's a full story on how that her father there, was a man in Grinnell, Iowa. And we knew where they'd all come from. But in Grinnell, Iowa, all we knew was that he was some sort of an elder in a church. And he was also one of the city councilmen. He was a leader in the city of a small town. Had been for many years, had a wife and a couple children. And her father, was this man, married to a woman, and had children, commits adultery with a woman in town. The woman gets pregnant. When it comes out that the woman is pregnant, her husband splits, was never heard from again. They tried to find him, and he just left. He left his wife, and his wife had 2 children herself already. She's pregnant. She goes on, and this goes around a little town. She goes on and delivers this child, my grandmother. After my grandmother is born, when she's still just a little baby, her mother dies. When her mother dies, her father's wife, that he committed adultery against with this woman, forgives not only this woman, but takes my grandmother into her home and adopts her as her own child. And then as she is growing up, though, in this home, which ended up she had some half-brothers and half-sisters. Also, this woman, amazingly, when she died, she had 2 children. She took those children into her home as well. The woman, and didn't actually adopt them, but took them in and cared for them as they grew up. Incredible. Time goes on. My grandmother grows up, meets my grandfather. They fall in love. She gets pregnant. The very thing her father did and her mother did. Now she did. Well, back in those days, what you did is you moved away. And so they had a quick wedding there, and then back in Iowa, and then they send them off with this nice thing, this happy couple in love, but she's pregnant, and then they come to California, and he starts his business. Gets going out here, and whether they loaned him money or whatever, he ended up doing quite well. Then they celebrated their first anniversary and called it their second. And then every year, it was just a lie. You just simply to now make their daughter legitimate in everybody's eyes. So when it was their actual 24th anniversary, they celebrated their 25th, and so forth. And so they're living this lie for years and years and years. Yeah, when it was their 50th, it was actually their 49th. There's a lie. And here, till finally, my grandmother, then, she felt so guilty. But she writes this letter to me explaining all of this to her. I need to get this out. What a terrible woman. I've taken you away from your real family and your relatives that you ought to have had back in Iowa, and the family and the uncles and the aunts, and we've lied to you about all of this, and we started our own life and to make us look, because we were terrible people and we'd done a terrible thing, and this is all written out. All there. But do you suppose it brought out and when my mother and my aunt read this, do you think it brought out their wrath or their anger? They looked and realized this woman, though she was a Christian, though she was forgiven, though she knew she was forgiven, the guilt contained her. She still lived under her entire life. And then, of course, did they go and say, Mother, I can't believe you ruined all of our lives? No. It didn't bring out their anger, their love. They came to her and they said, You're one, we love you. We forgive you. We don't care, but we care about you. And they wept and shared and prayed together, and God did some healing. But you can be held in something for years. One act, one thing can take somebody's life, and they're living hiding. And they're living under the power, still yet, of canceled sin. And here Jesus, what he needed to do and wanted to do more than anything else, he had to set her free. This woman there, he looks in as he writes these things, one by one, they peel away. One by one, the accuser is gone. One by one, it's gone. And then when they're all gone, then he stands up and he looks around. And he asks her the question, Woman, where are those thine accusers? And she had to look there and say, I have none. She had to be, if you could just imagine this transition, just in this, she just got caught in the act. And now as she's drugged down, and now she's going to die, she thinks. And now the very ones that wanted to stone her, they themselves are gone. And now Jesus looks at her and he says, Neither do I condemn thee. As he took the hook out. And he says, Go. Sin no more. You're free from this hook. It's not in your jaw. It won't contain you. The snare is gone. The snare is broken and you are free. Woman, you can fly. And one of the things that Jesus so deeply loves to do is set, people free. Some act. Something they were guilt, maybe something that happened a long time ago in your life. You're out on travels and some sin, some opportunity, somewhere the Lord sets you up and there's some fear of exposure. Something there that has yet somebody you could run into in town, something there that you could come out. Something that that you never know, it's just right behind, it's still there. And yet you're forgiven, Jesus loves you, and yet there, you don't yet realize the master musician, the master craftsman, the master one that he can play an instrument like nobody else in the world ever could play an instrument and set somebody free. What am I bidding, good folks, he cried. Who will start the bidding for me? $1? Who will make it $2? $2, who will make it $3? $3 once, $3 twice, and going. But no, for from the room far back came a gray-haired man, and he picked it up with a bow. Then wiping the dust off the old violin and tightening its loosened strings, then he played a melody as pure and sweet as a caroling angel sings. Well, the music stopped in the auctioneer, and a voice that is quiet and low said, Now what am I bidding for the old violin, as he held it up with a bow? $1,000? Who will make it $2? $2,000? Who will make it $3? $3,000 once, $3,000 twice, and gone, said he. Well, the people cheered, but some of them cried, We don't quite understand. What change it's worth? But quick came the reply. Why, was the touch of the master's hand. And many a man with life out of tune is battered and scarred with sin. Oh, he's auctioned cheap by the thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, and he's going, and he's almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd can never quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that is wrought. by a touch from the Master's hand. And today, maybe some of us, we find ourselves, I need, Jesus, you to touch me. You know and I know the snare. I know you've died for me. I know I'm forgiven. But Lord, it still holds me in guilt. It still contains me. Break the power of canceled sin. Set the prisoner free.